Not long ago, we got the first trailer for the upcoming Karate Kid Legends movie. I've always been a massive fan of the Karate Kid franchise. I used to have the original film on VHS, and it was an absolute masterpiece. I haven't actually watched the movie for years and years, but I always find myself rewatching the best bits and clips like where Miyagi beats down the bullies, or when Daniel hits the crane kick. I never really saw the sequels, but the first one was always a childhood favourite. Then they made that reboot film with Jaden Smith. When I was younger, I automatically decided it must be trash simply because it exists and it's not the original film. I think a lot of people had that similar perspective. Then eventually I gave it a chance, and what do you know, it was actually a really good movie. Felt kind of stupid looking back on how much I disliked it before. But then the franchise stopped cold. There's Cobra Kai, yeah, but that has a different feel to it. I always figured a fresh Karate Kid film would be on the way. It took 15 years, but here we are at last. We got Karate Kid Legends. The first trailer was great. I loved it and got me nice and hyped, but it didn't give us much story. Just gave us a look at the characters and showed us some action. This next trailer that just released, it does give us that. And so now we're going to work our way through it. Let's get going. We start off the trailer with a little pre-roll fun, with the three leads doing some posing. It's pretty goofy, but that's part of the fun for me. I gotta say, before we start, it is crazy to see Jackie Chan getting old. I don't like it, but at the same time, I reckon he looks very good for 70. We start off the trailer properly in China, at what I assume is Mr. Han's Kung Fu school, or maybe just a temple on that wide shot, because it is really big, isn't it? How do you go from an apartment handyman to owning something like that in 15 years? Must be a damn successful school to be able to charge rates that would let you pay for this. Our protagonist, Li Fong, is looking a bit sad, and Mr. Han asks him if he wants to talk about whatever's going on. He replies that he's upset because his mum wants them to move to New York City and leave everything behind. As he says that, he's looking at a photo of what I assume is his brother. I'm thinking that either the brother's in prison or he's dead. Not really many other options, are there? Not if it's being framed as they're moving to get away from it all. Mr. Han then tells him that sometimes that's the only way you can move forward. Realistically though, he's just trying to make him feel better about everything. It seems that we're going to be spending a very, very small amount of time in China, and then almost the whole film's going to be set in New York City, except for some parts in LA with Daniel. Even that though, seems like it's just going to be a single scene. Seems that Lee's mum's going to be the overprotective sort. Not just moving them to another country, but also seemingly banning him from fighting in general, which I guess means his martial arts training is out of the window. She also seems like she's going to be somewhat disapproving of his new and only friend being a girl. On top of that, I suppose this girl's going to start doubling as the role of love interest for his character as well. We have a few shots of Lee struggling at school and some domestic slice of life shots of him and his mum before we cut over to a karate dojo where Lee's watching longingly through the window. He and Mia are talking, and he talks about how he used to do kung fu, but now he doesn't. She notes that he's clearly not over it yet, but he still has that no fighting ban hanging over his head. Then we meet the villain, Connor. He's training very intensely inside and then just kicks the head off some poor bastard. That's the sort of thing I've always found strange about this kind of movie. That the villain kid is always just murdering fools in training like it's nothing, and nobody seems to care about it. I get that the coaches in these franchises are always aggressive and value violence, but at the same time, they usually have them showcase that aggression through bullying on the street or being too rough when sparring. This wasn't a spar, the dude was just holding the kick pads. Damn. At the same time though, I guess it sets him up as a massive loose cannon and a mountain to climb for Lee. We briefly get a look at Lee doing his own private training. He doesn't seem as good as I was expecting him to be. Wasn't he training with Han for years? Does Kung Fu just suck compared to karate or something? Or has he gotten rusty? It seems that it's on the subway that he meets Connor for the first time, where Connor, I guess he has a crush on Mia or something, or maybe he's an overprotective relative or friend, but he confronts him and asks who Lee is while staring him down. This doesn't seem to be an isolated incident either, as Mia tells him not to start. Yikes, get away from him. Hopefully we don't have to wait for the end of the movie to see this guy get got. It's always so good when the teacher beats up the bully at the start out of nowhere, so hopefully we get Daniel or Han whooping Connor just a little bit. Only a teensy little bit, please. It seems that Lee is frightened of this guy, and you know what? Fair enough. I too would pull my hood up and hope this psycho doesn't see me as I'm walking down the street. Nobody wants to get their ass beat like that. Especially when we see them get their first battle, where they brawl in front of the whole school, and Lee takes some swings and gets laid out with a kick. A kick that is delivered whilst the dude has his hands in his pockets. That's a little bit worse than your standard early Karate Kid beatdown as well, isn't it? It's worse than Daniel's and Dre's. At least when they were picked apart, they were largely untrained and using a typical brawler style of swinging your fists wildly. Since their bully was a trained fighter, they end up getting destroyed. Except, hasn't Lee been a pupil of Han for years? Why is he getting destroyed like this? Later on in the trailer, Han says that Lee is to him what Daniel was to Mr. Miyagi. But then he goes and gets one-shotted by this dude who isn't even trying. He is styling on him with his hands in his pockets. We move on to see Mia walking him home and telling him that he can't step up to dudes like Connor because he's too strong and he wins the 5 Boroughs Karate Championship every single year. Dude's a prodigy. Initially, I figured this was after the school fight, but then I realized Lee was wearing a black jacket in that fight. Here he's wearing the red jacket, like he was when he was on the train when he met Connor for the first time. So what seems to have happened is that he gets his ass beat on the train, then he comes back for more at school and gets beat again, but worse, since it's in front of his whole peer group and he gets rinsed. I guess after all of this disgrace, he wants to get back into fighting. His mum says no because of what happened with his brother. Enter Mr. Han, who comes over from China, it seems. Whether she calls him and he comes, or whether he was always going to be visiting is unclear, but it seems obvious that he's going to be the one who convinces Lee's mum to let him try to compete in this karate tournament, so that he's able to work for something, to achieve something and not feel crushed down, to potentially become destructive, like his brother. Based on all of these lines, I figured the brother in question, maybe he's in prison for fighting, maybe he beat somebody up and they hit their head and died or something like that. Then it's over to Mr. Miyagi's old place where Mr. Han goes, I assume after he's spoken to Lee and his mum. Although it would be funny if he somehow managed to predict what was going to happen and arranged this prematurely on his way in from China. At first, Daniel's resistant. Even though he understands that this kid is important to Han, he doesn't want to have to uproot his life and move to New York City even on a temporary basis. Fair enough, it's a long way. A 5-hour flight or something like that, absurd. I tell you what though, this scene makes me wish the actor for Mr. Miyagi was still alive. Would have been so fun to see him shouting out orders at Lee with the other two. Yes, he'd be in his early 90s, but it's not like he'd have to do any choreography himself. Just have him talk, or use a body double if you want the old fella to have a Yoda moment and kick some ass. I did find Mr. Han not taking no for an answer to be rather funny. Gave me a good giggle, and I sort of think they maybe should have saved that joke for the actual release instead of using it up in the trailer. It's a good one. Then again, they did need a cool down scene after Lee getting his ass beat. Of course, what kind of movie would this be if they didn't have him come back? So he does, and the two teachers team up to train Lee to be ready for the competition. They say he has a foundation in Kung Fu, although they don't showcase him being all that good, and that they're going to build on that skill set with karate. It's probably for the best considering that even with his basis in Kung Fu, he got schooled. Schooled at least twice, but could have been more. I will admit I could have done without them saying the words, let's make a karate kid. It's a bit goofy to be honest. Also, I know he's probably saying it the correct way, the traditional way, whatever, but when Daniel keeps saying karate, I just laugh because it instantly makes me think of Ross from Friends and the way he'd say it.
Karate.
We then get a couple of clips of these two guys just beating the shit out of the poor kid. I'm not sure that's the best way to learn. Flipping him on what seems to be a hardwood deck. Not even onto padding or anything. Ouch! Seems like they're just both flexing their techniques on the other teacher, whilst forcing this kid to be a crash test dummy. Oh, and then, after being surely rattled and maybe concussed after all of that, they're yelling at him to focus up. Brutal. We see that scene of Daniel giving Lee the headband, which is still as cool as it was in the first trailer. I expect it's going to be more emotional in the film though. We need the context for it. We see Han and Daniel beating up those dudes at what I expect was a street competition. Surely that's not going to be one of the official fights, is it? If so, damn. But yeah, they wreck these guys. We get some voiceover of Daniel telling Lee to remember what he's fighting for, as it hones in on Lee's brother's face, this time with incense burning. Maybe he is dead, not in prison. Then we get some good old-fashioned, out-of-this-world Karate Kid shenanigans. Crazy flips, Lee punching an olive oil container in a diner and sliding it across the counter. I'm guessing that's going to be to develop perfectly powered punches that hit as hard as they need to. No more, no less. We get that crazy alleyway fight and Lee hugging his mum before he squares up at the contest. Hell yes, just yes. This looks so damn good. This movie is going to be a banger, mark my words. It better do well financially. I need more of these films. If it flops and there's never any more made, I will cry. Anyway though, that's the end of the trailer and there isn't much else to say. And so I'll just remind you these have all been my opinions and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the trailer? Did you like it? Hate it? Anything you've noticed or would like to add? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe and let me know.